All right, so like I was saying, attendance, I have to do this for the recording. Attendance is mandatory in this class, and I know I've kind of been a little bit like, oh, whatever on that a little bit, but it is something what we signed up for, and we need more people. And again, this section has been good, but generally speaking, the attendance has been kind of crappy. Hello. So, for overall, I'm talking about really for the other section, but again, if we don't have people here, then it's difficult to do anything. So, especially when we have situations where we have to interview people and like the other person doesn't show up. Had that happen a few times. So, for this next assignment, I actually purposely made it so that we don't interview each other in class. So we don't have that issue. All right. Now I did talk a little bit, I gave you guys, I think everybody that's here now was here for that session, but last week I talked a little bit about making a video and essentially what it entails, okay? So what I'm gonna ask you guys to do actually is put that into effect. Okay, this way, okay? Oh yeah, I should give you the student view. Go, okay, so this is the new assignment. All right, and I'll be talking about that in a sec. First, I just want to talk about, I actually was really pleased with the performance this class had with the first two assignments. I realized that, I've been spacing things out here because we've been meeting once a week, and I've tried not to actually try to avoid this whole situation where, we have to we have to do things like online. I want to actually teach in class and work in class. So the reason why I think it's important to actually attend the class, because I'm able to actually look over people's work before they actually hand it in. Right. But anyway, the first assignment, the profiles, I thought actually were very good. Okay. I don't know if is this hard to see? This is actually from Alex. We call that sick today. And again, the idea here is just to really get something that's, there's really beauty and simplicity in news writing. Okay, trying to be as plain, as simple as possible. All right, trying to get it so that it's easy for everybody to understand. And again, the whole idea with digital news writing is that it really has to be more succinct than ever. It has to be as close to essentially broadcast writing as possible. Broadcast writing is about if you hear reports, if you hear people talking in a broadcast report, everything is about getting right to the point. Okay. All right. So let's see here. So she wrote about Dana. Okay. Following a break from music production during the COVID pandemic, Dana Tong will be returning to the scene with a new album. Okay. So, right there, we know what's going on right away. There's no prefacing, that was a common trait I see in a lot of, actually saw again, I hate to crap on the other section, but I saw that a lot in the other section where they felt like they had to have almost like a preamble before the, like in the Constitution, before they even got to the point of the story. They had to go through this whole setting up process, which again, I think is actually a product of, educational system basically taught to write one way. And that is what I did on my summer vacation. When you do that, a lot of people are also given, I give word limits, word minimums, right? But to me, it's actually more important to really have substance. If you can get, I said 500, 800 words on these assignments, but if you have a good 450 words, that's more important to me than padding to get to that 500. Okay, so I feel like a lot of times people are kind of trained to pad, so they'll put in an introductory paragraph or two or three. And again, the whole idea is that the first paragraph is often replicated and put on here in digital news writing. Okay, so if you have a situation where it takes forever to get to the point of the story, you know, it can be a lot more difficult to actually, for the editors to actually release that story to the public because they don't know what the story's about. You know, they actually look at the story and they say, what's the story about? I have to wait forever to get there, you know, right? So this one is very simple and right to the point. Following a break from production, Dana Tong will be returning to the scene with a new album. So that to me was interesting and unique because, you know, how many Rutgers students actually have, you know, an album? You know, even if it's independently done, how many have the time to do that, right? All right, so the album title, Through the Window, is to be released in May of this year. I think she means next year, but anyway, containing a total of 12 songs. My inspiration for the album is definitely a mix of Frank. So we get the who, what, where, why, when, okay? So what does she do? I mean, it could be, those questions could be answered basically again in order of importance. To me, one of my first questions would be, what is that album? What is it about? Okay, so it's called Through the Window. My inspiration for this album is definitely a mix of Frank Ocean, Mitzi, and Kanye West. Says Tong, it is going to be one of those albums designed for a therapeutic cry session. Okay. And there's more about what is that album about. The album's title song Window features a collaboration between Tong and her idol, Frank Ocean. Oh. The song will be released on March 15th on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube to gain publicity for I probably, I did note to her that like she had last name on second reference, okay? Tong is currently a fourth year. So now we actually get into maybe a little bit of what or why, you know, usually it's like what and why are usually the first questions to be answered, right? You know, why is this being done? I'm seeing a lot of this, you know, and that makes sense, you know. People are trying to do something to lift themselves up and find something to do. This is what they did during quarantine over the last year and a half, you know? We haven't like totally gotten out of it yet. So she taught herself how to produce music during quarantine. She is looking forward to presenting her songs to the public soon, okay? All right, so that was what kind of drive us. It's all about the present, you know? It's about something that actually is happening, you know, as we speak, okay? But then as we get through the present, we go into background, okay? Notice how the paragraphs are short, you know, to the point. She taught herself their active voice, noun, verb. Dana Tong is currently in the fourth year. They're all on basically one topic, okay? I know this was a good one. This was an easy one. Not everybody is able to find a topic like this so easily, right? I know we've talked about it. I know it's you know, it's difficult when you have a situation where, you know, maybe it's not instantly recognizable as a news story, you know. One thing I try to encourage everybody to do is to, you know, do a story that would be unique but relatable to other people, you know. And sometimes those stories usually are things like we've talked about actually over here, and that is, I mean, two stories I see that actually come up frequently that students I've had haven't easily recognized it as a story, but it is a story to me because it is a little bit of a unique situation. One of them is the whole idea of having to work, you know, a full-time job or even like a busy job and do a full-time course schedule at the same time. You know, that's hard, okay? And it may not be entirely unique, but it seems like everybody's situation is unique, you know? Don't you think? How many people here work and go to school at the same time? Yeah. And but then it also varies, right? Like how often do you work? If you want me asking, what's your work schedule usually? There you go. That's a unique situation. A lot of people actually will work maybe like a few nights a week at a restaurant or something like that. I can actually totally relate to your situation. Yeah. because that's what I did, all right? And usually that schedule is like Sunday through Thursday, right? Yeah, it's not even like a regular schedule. So finding that work-life balance to me is interesting. Another one is the idea of, and some of you are gonna like be familiar with this one, and that is, the idea of actually changing majors or changing the focus of your academics here. Okay, that to me is an interesting story because again, everybody's situation is unique. What I often see is I see a situation where, actually I've seen this with my own friends, where they enter school maybe interested in something like biology. Actually, my own son was this way. He entered school with an interest in engineering. He ended up, he's an accountant. He just started last week as an accountant. He's working out of his bedroom that he grew up in. He just came home last week. So he had his graduation this past weekend for 2020. How about that? Hey, of William and Mary. It actually was really good. This is Rutgers doing this. They delayed the graduation for like a year. They made it a homecoming weekend. It actually worked to go on people there, So anyway, so he was another one, went from like really kind of one area to something totally different, And what I see often is I see the student who's actually kind of pushed into like the science area or the medical field, sort of something like that. And they're like, oh, this isn't for me. I'd rather be a writer. I'd rather be like on top of news events or something. So they switch to journalism. That's an interesting story, And sometimes they kind of counter the family resistance, That's pretty typical. I haven't had that problem. I didn't have that problem myself, luckily, because my father could like push for things and could be like pretty demanding. But this is, believe it or not, being in journalism is something I wanted to do since I was young. My friend Bill Borden, however, who I've had as a guest speaker in this class, he was one who was kind of pushed into biology in that area and then said screw this and then went into journalism. I want to do what I want to do, So, so that to me, even though it made the overall situation, the overall idea of switching focus in academics isn't necessarily unusual. Everybody's situation is kind of unique. Everybody encounters like different pressures, Everybody encounters different questions in their mind. Is the right decision? Okay, so does that make sense? Okay. But the whole idea is really just trying to make sure that if you do choose that topic, is to stay on that topic throughout. Okay. So in this kind of situation, I mean, we go with, Dana is, now we go into the background. Basically, she's been active in the arts since she was young. She played clarinet 7 years, again, background is still important information. It's just what led up to the actual, and it actually, it's essentially what led up to her becoming this musician now, it's just not as important as what's happening now, okay? So it goes down lower in the story, okay? She found that studying classical guitar made her feel less inclined to pursue it as a career. She now hopes to pursue music journalism as moving to New York City. There you go. So it's not just that, but it's also musical journalism. When she is not writing music, Tom can be found. Okay, well, doesn't necessarily have everything to do with music, but but we do actually return to that topic essentially. Okay, there's probably and maybe more details about what she's doing and what she has done on the music side of things. Okay, all right, so. Keeping it simple, maintaining that singular focus from top to bottom. Okay, that's the most important thing here, really. Okay, and like I said, really just having a good, sharp lead that doesn't necessarily have to be something that blows people over, but just gets right to the point and tells people what's going on, because the substance is what matters more than the style. Okay. Anybody have any questions about anything? Or? All right, so I actually did create an entry for both for the rewrites, I know this is confusing, and I'm sorry. I know, but you know, I do want to like separate things from section 1 and section 2. So, you know, I do have entries for the rewrites for, you know, the profile, and that's actually, yeah, down here. Okay, upcoming assignments that are due. You'll see that the you are against section 2 Thursday class. The rewrites for the leads, rewrite the leads. I actually said email them to me, but I thought, well, that's probably could be a little bit confusing. So I actually created an entry for that. So if you could just submit the rewrite for the worksheets to the assignment entry on Canvas, okay? And the same deal here, that's also due tomorrow, okay? The section 2 Thursday profile, somebody you know, the rewrites for that too, okay? Actually, we talked about Monday, so that's right. Okay, so you can do that Monday, that's fine, okay? All right. All right, so anyway, that's the deal there. Again, the leads assignment was basically, I know it wasn't something we talked about in class, but it was something I felt that was important to do because you know, the initial stories I saw from people, I was like, you know, we really need to kind of like focus on what's the most important thing in the story. Okay, one thing in particular about those worksheets is that the big thing to me in like those is the numbers they're talking about. Okay, you're talking about, and I'll give this answer away. Okay, if you're talking about a 53% increase in murders, okay, I'm not living that down. I know it's probably a little bit shallow for me to say that, but that's important news. You know, 12% increase in tuition, 10% increase in skin cancer. I mean, it's all about you know, it's being specific. Okay, it's all about like basically, you know, showing what's the biggest, newest thing. I mean, numbers can tell a story, a whole story. You know, if it's something that shows an increase in skin cancer by 10%, that's significant, and people should know that. Now we want to know who, what, where, why, when. Okay. If there's like an increase in murders, that's like, you know, that high, people want to know that, and they want to know who, what, where, why, when. Okay. By the same token, those are obviously unique stories, right? Because how often does that happen in every town? You know, I realize that, you know, sometimes statistics can be like a little bit, you know, they could be a little deceiving in some ways, because maybe 53% increase in murders, maybe that's like that's an increase from like 2 to 3 or something like that. But, you know, I think in this particular case, it's not that. Okay. So I think I would stick with that as like your lead, making sure that you point that out. So I made that important thing in the leads, that you make sure you brought out what is the biggest, newest thing. And also when you have an attempted murder, okay, involving somebody who's in a wheelchair, you know, and then somebody's trying to set them on fire. That's obviously an interesting, important story in itself. Okay. But if their motivation was eating the chocolate Easter bunny, you know, think about that. Okay, how often does that happen? All right, you ever heard of anything in your entire life? Forget about it being an Easter bunny, but eating chocolate, you know, and then actually driving themselves to that point. All right. So, anybody have any questions on that? Okay. All right. So let's go to the new assignment. Okay. And I have that down here. Okay. So I wrote Monday. Oh, I meant to say Thursday. I apologize. What's that? Yeah, actually, I should say that. I'm glad you said that, because yeah, I'm glad. I saw that in some assignments. I saw people wrote headlines, you know, what I mean by that. See, the lead is the first paragraph of a story, essentially. Okay, it basically identifies what the story is about. All right. And so, you know, but we are actually going to deal with headlines in this class. something you don't deal with and writing for media, okay? But the headline is basically at the top of the story. It's actually like its own style. It's weird. I mean, it's almost like I can't even begin to explain to you where that came from, that whole idea of like writing headlines the way they are. But they're typically written in the present tense, you know? So if you have something like, you know, Murphy, it's an announcement that says something like Murphy is giving money to counties or something like that. It'll say Murphy gives money to counties. You know? And there's usually words missing from that sentence. It's not really a true sentence, right? It's written in the present or future tense, right? I saw that in some leads where you actually they wrote them that way, but actually, lead is a sentence, a typical sentence. It's almost always written in like past tense. Okay. So just make sure when you actually rewrite those leads that they are actual sentences, okay? You know, with the correct verb tense, you know. A report was released, okay, showing there was a 53% increase in murders. Yeah. You don't go to the state, what they call it, State Bureau of Investigation. The State Bureau of Investigation released, past tense, a report showing a 53% increase in murders. What I saw in some cases where it was State Bureau of Investigation releases report showing increase in murders. Something. That's a headline. Without even like the number, you know. You have to actually write like a complete sentence. Okay. Think of it again as your very first paragraph of the story. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is what I'm going to ask you guys to do here. Okay. I'm actually going to ask you guys to actually rewrite a news release, okay, into 500, 800 words, okay, but also do a video, okay. And on this one, I'm really going to like emphasize the importance of like making sure we get the video right, okay. So if, you know, obviously, you know, I'll look at the video if we need any kind of corrections, that sort of thing. That's great. But at the same time, I don't have like super high standards for how that should be done. I just really want to make sure that we, you know, have framing, okay? All right, that again, using the rule of thirds that we talked about. I also didn't, by the way, I also didn't get a photo from everybody. I was actually a little bit lax on that one because I know that not everybody's been here in class to get a photo, but if I said to you that we need a photo for that first assignment, you should really get me the photo. I've kind of left that again. Not really setting like an immediate deadline on that, but just let's make sure that we get a photo eventually, maybe by the end of the semester. Okay. So anyway, the rule of thirds, making sure that you have a frame that is not just like somebody's face, you know, and you have some background in it, you know, particularly in this particular case where it's going to be getting people's reactions, getting a person's reaction. Okay. You know, making sure that actually it's, you have some sort of setting. We actually can get an idea where they are. Like if it's a Rutgers student, you probably want to show some background that they're at Rutgers, okay? Whether they're sitting at a computer or walking on the street, okay? All right. Actually, and then actually the assignment itself, we'll talk about some of the things I talked about last week. All right, so please think of this as like a breaking news assignment. Okay, now I'm not asking you to go out right now and run out and do it. Okay, I'm just saying that actually when you do it, try to imagine yourself like doing a breaking news assignment, and you have to actually like get this story out there, and at the same time get a quick video. Probably in the typical newsroom, you probably have to get it done within like an hour or two, the whole thing. So, all right. And the release is right here. Okay, I have a link to it. I also have it right here. Okay. All right. So as you can see, it's written in the kind of press release format. This is actually an old release, just so you know, but I changed the date on it. All right. Governor Murphy today, alongside blah, 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 announced $60 million. This actually isn't like a very poorly written news release. This is actually like fairly well written for a news release, but what I need you to do is basically rewrite it so it's a little more understandable. We take out like, I'll give you an idea here. You try to get to like basically the point. And that is that Murphy gave $60 million to counties and municipalities, to help in amid the COVID crisis, okay? I mean, to give you a little hint there, that's probably where the lead should go. What they do is they typically do is they try to throw in like a bunch of names to try to make sure that they're recognized and that sort of thing. And they're not really, when they write these releases, they're not really trying to like sell it to the public. They're not trying to necessarily make it readable to the public. They're trying to just get the media to actually understand their message. And that is they're doing this great thing and all these other wonderful people are involved. Your job is to turn around to the public and say, well, okay, this is what's happening. All right. As simple as possible. Okay. All right. And then, I mean, there's a lot of quoting around here. This story could be shortened, that's for sure. You don't have to put everything in here. You just really need the basic, what is going on here and who's benefiting, okay? All right. Now, with the actual video part of the assignment, I only need you to interview one person, okay? It can be a friend, it can be a family member. I'm going to make this actually the criteria for this one easy. We don't have to interview each other, okay? You could just basically find whoever. You could find somebody in your house. I'm fine with that, okay? In your apartment, whatever, whatever you are, all right? I know that, again, this goes against the rules of the journalism gods that I've been told over and over again. Don't interview people you know. That's not true. Reporters do it all the time. And like I said, I mean, it helps break the ice sometimes, okay? All right, so basically I just need one person's reaction to this, to the idea that the governor is giving, all these counties additional money to help the state get back on its feet amid the COVID crisis, okay? All right. Or gave, I should say, okay? All right, so anyway, so what I have here essentially is like some, do's and don'ts for actually making a video, okay? The equipment, again, I'm an iPhone, smartphone, and questions ready to ask. That's all you really need, okay? You need to think of this as a sidebar to a main story. So a sidebar usually breaks out a small portion of the main story and expands on it. That's what, when you have these digital media packages, that's what they typically do, is that the actual main story is still the most important part, because that's the part that actually tells the story. But the videos themselves kind of like break out and add to the story. They don't necessarily replace it, okay? So in this particular case, you have a news release that basically has politicians talking. What you want to do is, with this video, is to get the reaction on the ground, okay? How does this really impact people? Okay. Okay. So the main news of the video will come from your video subject. Okay. Please frame the interview of him or her using the rule of thirds that we talked about with the photos, okay, and with the video, which we already talked about. Feature the interview subject in 1/3 of the frame, and use the other 2/3 to show some background. It helps tell the story about the interview subject. Again, like where they live, where they are, okay? I mean, if they might, there's, where do you think is like, what do you think is probably like, actually, when you think, I mean, I know I talked about getting like the Rutgers background and all that stuff. When you think about it, like what's probably like where have people been over the last year and a half, mostly during this COVID thing? You also got to kind of relate, connect to the subject. Where would probably be maybe the best setting to be? Where have people typically been in the last year and a half mid-COVID? Yeah. So, I mean, if you're able to do that, that's fine. Maybe you're able to get like maybe they have stuff about Rutgers hanging on the wall. I'm not gonna have like high demands here. Just do the best you can, okay? Just try to show some activity in the scene, okay? And it's not just the person, okay? All right. All right, you need to focus on two things in this video, much like you would if you're writing a story on a person who stands to. You need to focus on two things in this video, much like you would if you were writing a story on somebody who stands to benefit, okay? The person's reaction and cutaway video or B-roll that begins to balance your story, okay? So what is that? That's where basically a news story essentially, I'm sorry, a video, okay, um, will follow a pattern that's similar to a written news story, okay? That there are breaks, okay? All right, the idea is that you have, it really can be in any order, but you can have essentially, the thing to do is actually, it's always good to have a plan before you go out to a video, okay? You don't have to have like this big detailed plan. But you have different parts, or essentially where maybe you have, the opening, okay? And maybe you just kind of show the area where they live, okay? That's usually called an establishing shot. It helps tell the where, okay? That's where, if you see people do stories on Rutgers, they'll usually like show Rutgers, okay? They'll actually show the buildings, because the buildings at Rutgers are unique, they're old, not all of them, but they're old enough, right? So they'll show that part. And then they'll do is they'll go to the interview after that, okay? Okay, and then they'll go back to maybe like another establishing shot, okay? Again, showing maybe the area where they live, or maybe there's something about the subject matter like COVID that can be connected, like maybe like a sign showing some of the restrictions saying like, please wear your mask or something like that, okay? And then you go back to the video, okay? I'm asking you to do that over a 2-minute period, okay? Ultimately, when you edit it, it's a 2-minute period, okay? Usually that's how the flow goes. Usually, again, you have like essentially what they call an establishing shot. Then you go to the interview itself. This is probably like maybe 20 seconds. This could be like a minute, then maybe another 20 seconds, and then like a minute, okay? The idea is that you don't want to bore the reader. You want to give them like a full sense of where they are and what they're doing, okay? All right. Let's say interview, okay? All right. We'll work on this in class too. We'll work on this next week, okay? All right. All right. One thing to keep in mind is that I know I'm not asking people to have, typically when when people are doing videos, especially with the big pros, they'll have like a tripod to keep the camera steady, that sort of thing. You want to keep in mind that actually doing a video essentially is also about being clear, accurate, and focused, okay? So if you have a camera that shakes, it's hard to look at, right? Again, think about those old videos that your family took or something like that, vacations and stuff. You go like, oh, you want to avoid that, so just try to hold it as still as possible. Sometimes actually when I'm trying to take a still shot, actually we'll put it on top of something like a car, something like that, so it doesn't shake. But just make sure I try to hold it as steady as possible. It also says do not pan, and I talked about this last week, okay? Try to avoid this, okay? That's or or zooming in and out too much. I mean, zooming in and out's not so bad, but this, have you ever noticed it's like not clear? Not clear at all, It's just, try to avoid doing that. If you want to get an area where somebody lives or whatever, the best thing to do is actually do like a few seconds here, a few seconds here, still, a few seconds here, still, okay? Just roll them together, okay? All right. Again, please keep the frame horizontal, show more in the frame. Okay, I saw some photos come in that showed they were still vertical. You got to really like stick with horizontal. That's actually typically, vertical can work sometimes if you're able to show something up here, like the photo, but usually horizontal is what works. Okay. The overall video should be about 2 minutes long. And I keep essentially the same pattern here. Essentially, the cutaway is the same as the B-roll. Okay, so the overall part should be like equal parts interview and cutaway or B-roll video, alternating maybe 30 seconds at a time. Maybe 30 seconds B-roll, maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute interview, maybe another 30 seconds B-roll, okay? Here's a question I get a lot. You don't have to necessarily narrate the video, okay? There's plenty of news videos where they just show the scenes and they have the interview and the person who's doing the interview, the person who is actually being interviewed is doing the talking, okay? You want to actually insert yourself and have the narrator, that's fine. If you feel more comfortable doing that. Is there a better way? Actually, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, sometimes I feel like narrators can get away with it, get in the way of things and maybe talk too much. On the other hand, I feel like they can kind of help establish everything, the scene, the story. So I'm gonna leave that up to you guys, okay? You know what I mean by that? Actually being narrated, okay? And also things like, I see sometimes I get like different skill levels because I've had people who were like really like into making videos in this class and it's just like really professional, that's great. And I try to tell people, look, I'm not, you know, those people are going to get graded the same way you are. You're going to get graded the same way they are. Okay. What I'm looking for is just essentially the basics. Okay. Making sure that you have a clear video, making sure that you have a video that, make sure that you have an interview that makes sense and is clearly spoken and understood. Okay. All right. So, I mean, if you want to do things like use title cards or whatever, that's fine. You know, please, and there's an important thing here too, is that make sure that you have the ability. Does everybody here have like see computers? So I see at least 3 people have iMovie, right? So you all have that? Okay, good. I know there's like programs on these computers and everything, but I just want to do something simple as iMovie. You don't know how to use it? Okay, so we can do that like in the next class. We can actually like you know, maybe actually like essentially like maybe look at what we taught, you know, maybe like try to start like doing some filming this week or something. So, you know, next class we can actually like maybe look and pop open our laptops and say, hey, what can we do with this? You know, so all right. I want to show you basically actually a video here. It's not actually like the it's not actually the best video in the world, and it's not about one person or that sort of thing, but I want to kind of give you an idea. This is actually a really old video. It's not well done, but it has some of the, actually there's panic too, which is kind of cool, okay? But it does have some of the basics that I just spoke about, you know, that you know, this was done 35 years ago with a professional camera and everything, you know, but you know, what's interesting about it is that like, 33 years ago, but it's you know, it's really not really different than what they're doing now. Reporters are doing now on iPhones, you know. And you'll see there's actually that this is actually done with a narrator, so you'll see there's actually those kind of breaks, that kind of like, you know, break the flow, so it's not just dominated by one person talking or 2 people talking. You'll see there's actually establishing shots of the Rutgers University, that sort of thing. You'll see that it's actually kind of a pace that goes back and forth and back. All right. And yes, there's actually a reason I showed this video, because it's early in the morning and like usually like, I don't know, there's actually like a little segment in here and people go, oh my God. So I find it entertaining to show this. So, and also it's something that happened at Rutgers University, so why not? And it was actually a horrible event. There was a pledge who actually like drank 33 kamikazes, I think it was. Yeah, and he died. You know. This fraternity, by the way, was at the site of which is now the Kabod House. Okay, do you know where that is? It's right next to the gym. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look. So this idea is that basically there's an overall story that we talk about in the beginning about the tragedy itself, but the actual reaction part of the story is actually a reaction story. That's where the focus is. There's a main story here, which is about the tragedy itself and what's new with that. But the sidebar, the video, the person going out to Rutgers is actually is actually getting the sidebar then as a reaction to the incident and how the university is recovering. Okay.
Medical tests are still being conducted on the body of a Rutgers University freshman to find out if he drank himself to death at a fraternity pledge party. News 4's Perry Phelps visited the campus today.
At first glance, this fraternity looks like any other on the Rutgers University campus. But a closer examination.
See if she's actually shaking. You can see there's like probably no tripod here. But you can see how they did that? They kind of did the still and the still, you know. There's no panning so far, okay? It's just trying to show establishing shot, okay?
Reveals the remnants of an all-night pledge party that has closed the Greek house of Lambda Chi Alpha, a pledge party that has left freshman James Callahan dead, apparently from drinking too much, and another student treated at a nearby hospital for alcohol-related illness.
The university is in mourning because of it. It's a terrible situation.
Not really a lot here in the rule of thirds here. Maybe the fireplace, you know. Probably could have done more with this shot.
Total incident. And it's one that I think.
But he is pushed over to the side.
Thank you for a number of issues.
Callahan was one of 13 students who had been invited to join the all-male fraternity. According to one student, pledges were told to drink until they got sick. And evidently, that's not an uncommon sight around the university.
I think a lot of people get very drunk. I think if you want.
Yeah, this is a great interview right here. See the stained glass window, maybe the staircase. I'm thinking that's probably what they're trying to go for here. You know, basically trying to show that this is actually like, this was like a very old building at Rutgers. I'm not even sure if it's there anymore. But it was that main old building that used to be like, I think by all the dorms, like Tinsley and all that, which is on the College Avenue campus.
At a campus bus on a Friday or Saturday night, you see people getting sick on themselves. You see people passing out. I think it's a big problem.
It's widespread throughout the campus, whether a fraternity in the dorms.
That's me. I just realized I have a mask on, so I know it's going to be readily apparent. Plus, of course, you know, the hair dye. No, actually, that was real hair pigmentation. Again, they're not like doing a great job with the rule of thirds here, but there is the atmosphere in the background of trees and other old Rutgers buildings trying to give you that kind of Rutgers flavor, okay? That only, you know, that you're at a college, you know, and there are trees and it's this old college, and here this tragedy is happening here. They're trying to show a little bit that juxtaposition, okay? And every photo you can see, even though they probably should be pushed a little bit more, but they're always, the person's always a little bit over to the side, you know, you notice that? Okay, and it's always horizontal, because again, the idea is to try to show a full picture, not just the person's face. If it was just me, you'd be like, ah.
Whatever. And I don't know how they're going to stop it.
Callahan and the rest of the students pledging the
Yeah, here they go panning. Slow panning isn't necessarily a bad thing, but try to avoid it, please. But again, the whole idea, they want to show this shot of old Queens. You know, because here it is, this beautiful, quaint, bucolic campus, and the horrible realities of the world are coming are on its grounds, or happening on its grounds. You know, so it's kind of mixed in here, as you can see. You want essentially how it went. See how it went from like establishing shot to interviews to now an establishing shot. That's where the narrator speaks. Okay. And giving you a sense of where we are and like maybe what the feeling is. It's a cold winter day, you know, with that crunchy snow, and that used to happen a lot, you know.
fraternity were all under the legal drinking age of 21, a legal limit that students admit is easy to get around, and a problem school administrators acknowledge.
And we try and encourage students to run non-alcoholic parties. We have enforcement regulations and policies, but peer pressure is still very, very strong, combating all of those efforts that we may take.
Fraternities will almost become like drinking clubs now. So that I think
This is the best job they did of the rule of thirds right here. Okay, so obviously a fraternity, okay, and him, okay, and the ground. You know, kind of showing them where he is. You know, that there's the College Avenue Gymnasium. Yeah. So we're at Rutgers. There's the place, the den of inequity, and there he is. See how he's pushed over to the side. Okay.
it's not about time something like this happened. I wish it had been something where it was just a shock. But maybe this will just change the atmosphere of fraternities here to clean up their act.
It's think it's going to change partying habits here at the school?
I don't think so. Not on a long-term basis anyway. I think that for a while things will slow down and then they'll get back to the regular behavior, basically.
And after the fact at Lambda Chi Alpha, all fraternity and sorority parties have been temporarily banned. Harry,
That last thing she said, probably no truer thing has ever been said, right? The party stopped at Rutgers. Yeah, that's why you go out and do this stuff. That's why you go out and do these sidebars, right? Because you just don't want to get the officials to give you the opinions, you know? That's why they get these, I mean, when reporters do these reactions, they're always like, I go interview people there, you know? They're always kind of like that. But this is like, that's the part of the story that's actually probably the most interesting, because you just hear that and you're like, you know, 33 years later, and you're like, oh my God, seriously, you know? Is that really like, you know, was that really something they actually like said and maybe like took into consideration, you know? You know, are they really just like kidding themselves so much? So, anyway, the idea there is, again, it's not like this is the greatest video in the world, but it does its job, okay? It's not the most professionally made video in the world, but it does its job, okay? You know, very simple. It's the idea of getting reaction, you know, getting people to talk, and basically adding to the overall story. And that is, it's giving people a sense of, actually more than anything, where they are, or what happens here, you know? Which you can't get in the main story. Okay, so with this COVID reaction story, I want to ask you to kind of do a similar thing. And that is, I want you to go out there and talk to a person who will say to you, you know, whether this really matters or not. You know, is this really something they're just gonna, like that last person just said, you know, is this really gonna help? You know, are we just gonna continue to be on the same hamster wheel? You know, or like they throw money at that situation, but we're still dealing with problems. You know, so all right. Does anybody have any questions about that, or?
Could you recommend using iMovie, like putting all together, putting all the clips together, and each and through editing, they got flow? Do you recommend that?
Well, I recommend any program you're comfortable with. I only mention iMovie because to me, it's the simplest one. It's the one that people have the most available to them. They have it on the phone, you know. So, I mean, there's other ones out there, you know, that obviously a little more complicated, you know, and Mac or Apple itself has like programs that are more complicated, that sort of thing. So I've had students in this class who say, why can't we use this? I'm like, you can use those programs if you want, that's fine. It's just that, you know, I remember when I would do a lot of video, and I went to graduate school and everything, we'd be up all night, you know, sometimes, you know, trying to get things right, you know. And I don't want to like give people the idea that you have to be up all night to do these things. Actually, that's really counterintuitive to what I'm trying to teach in this class. And in this class, I'm actually trying to teach you guys how to do things as quickly and as easily as possible. That's actually important. I'm not trying to like shortcut things or anything like that, but actually I'm trying to give people the idea of sense of urgency of news. You know, if you're given a breaking news story, you have to put that in. And you know, a lot of videos are very well watched, very well read. If they're very well watched and they're very well understood, you know, I mean, actually, again, one of the most popular videos of all time in news history was the plane landing in the Hudson in 2001. You know, and it was a surveillance video. You know? People just wanted to see it. You know, didn't have to have like come with any kind of fancy music. You know, that's royalty-free music or any of that stuff. You know, it didn't have to really come in the form of like, you know, like Tom Hanks didn't have to star in it. You know, it was just a plane landing in the water. You know, so you know, I was actually gonna like maybe actually go out do stuff like do video stuff, but I'm not thinking that actually like, you know, not since everybody's here, maybe we'll just like end it now. Is that okay? We can talk. All right. Does anybody have any additional questions about that? Okay. All right, well, thanks very much. Just let me know if you have any, if you're thinking, if you're doing anything, anything comes up, and like questions like, what programs we use or whatever. Not working out quite right or something. All right. All right. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it. So anyway, I was actually like, I was talking about, actually, so I was talking about an assignment. Both kind of facing some situation. So what I was thinking, I don't know if you have anything to show me or anything like that, but I think you guys till Monday because I'm sure if you have enough time to do it. So, but the idea again is just to really make sure that it's like bomb. I think that actually both your situation is very similar. So, You too. Thanks. Good, no problem. You know, one of the things that I think it's actually better, but I think I need more behavior. So that's why I was kind of over here. Speed. So when you when you decide to make this change like this, I was actually interested about the conversation with your mother had a conversation with somebody. Oh, you had a conversation. So yeah, when did that happen? So you you had this background STEM. And, I guess were you like heading in a certain direction specific? Computer science, right? I think I would probably like make that contrast more. It's not just dramatic. It's, oh, you have it here. But maybe I think that like if you had it like I think you need to get into more of like okay, so what has she done like in the last let's say 6 months to a year to shift in that direction. So when did you actually shift in that direction? In the last 6 months to a year? So it's good to like, sometimes there's always that question that kind of like gets us to the point where it's like, oh, she's actually doing something that's actually more than. How many people here write for the target, right? Or read it, yeah. I know the few. So, so yeah, that's what you said before. You said you do it 5 times a week. So that's actually one thing. I would maybe like make a blue graph. You know, maybe second, third, fourth graph. Basically, what she's done to basically help shift her. One of the things is she's working 5 days a week at the target. And the idea being that like, what's going on now? Okay. And then you said actually that's another good point is the writing. You don't really write your head, right? And then that takes a lot of time too, right? It's like, you know, I'm talking like I don't know what it was for me, but how many hours a week? So the reason why I'm asking that is because I lived with a computer science major. I remember this was 1987, 88, and he had a thing called email. And I was like, wow, what's that? You know? So it's like you go from this world where it's a computer science where maybe everything is kind of laid out to this world where you actually have to like maybe go work at a place in addition to take your classwork, you know? So that's another reason why I asked that was, you know, okay, so maybe you show a little bit of contrast, you know. So you get into like what kind of a change she made and what she's doing now, but also you want to, I think you get some family resistance. Okay. But was there like any kind of inner resistance about this? Was it like a hard change for you? Yeah. So I mean, I would probably go into then. Want to make sure you stay on topic. So what she did, what happened when she made this change, and then why she made this change. You know. I think you get into a little bit there, but basically, you know, it's something that's happened recently. So why she changes, and like what sort of like obstacles, whether they were mental, physical, whatever, she had to encounter. You know? So I'm talking probably about 6 or 7 graphs right there. Probably cut off some of the background. Right. But was it that was part of the decision making that was difficult, huh? Basically. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's tough to do, you know. It's actually like, you know, when you think about it, I mean, it's you know, you're kind of like set on one path, and then suddenly like you have to leap off it, and you're used to telling people like sorts of things like when you're like high school and everything. Well, I'm gonna go into computer science, blah blah blah. And then a couple of years down the road, you change, and then people are like, "Whatever happened to computer science?" Like they even ask that question, like, you know, almost like, "What's wrong with you?" You know, does that make sense? Yeah. And B, I think you had a similar situation, right? But it's a similar situation. Switch from like STEM to back. Wasn't there like kind of like a, I mean, I'll go be personal here. But wasn't there family pressure or something like that to walk her down one track?
Yeah, so that's why.
I think you gotta narrowly focus on that. I probably put maybe too many thoughts in your head. You're trying to like put in the background with Dominican Republic and you know that sort of thing. I think you got to stick with what she has. She has junior college. Took a big risk when she dramatically switched from science major to journalism. Blah, blah, blah. I think you need to kind of go in a similar direction. Just basically be as direct as possible. That is Diana Bonilla. was a, was set on a career path. You could tie, her situation is a little different because she actually does that. So you could say something like, that's right. And Maria was used to, was following a path of an academic path that like her family believed was best for her, but decided to switch to journalism instead. I think you have a similar situation with compare and contrast. She's like, she has this kind of pressure, and she decided to go in this direction instead. Then you go into like what she's done in the last 6 months, 6 to 3 months to a year. As she's made this change. Like, the people kind of things behind. We started taking journalism classes, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. What got you interested in journalism?
I
That's fine. I think so. Again, I think it's important to say, directly it says something like, again, family pressure kept her this way, but she decided to go this way. And like basically talk about what she's done to change that, which could be on this case, could be a couple graphs. But then like make sure that you have a double-edged sword going on. So you can then return to the family pressure, I think you need like a repeat of time. You need a repeat of that row lead that basically says that the same like family pressure, this, and then but she's decided, despite that, she's decided to go this way. And then well, I think that could be still in, just that it's back. Because now we're talking about back in high school. I think it bogged down. I think you just gotta stay as simple as possible. Basically, I know there's actually interesting things that happened in high school and everything, but how many years ago was it school? 2, 3? Yeah. What is she doing now? What is she doing? She decided to make this change, and then I don't know, is there, not to get too personal here, is the family still like, yeah, that's what's going on right now, That's the most important, that's the biggest thing. Like, most people only read like the first couple of paragraphs of the story. At the top. Like, you need family pressure, and then I need family pressure. She decided to make this change. And then a couple of graphs, basically what she's doing. Look at the top, and she's sticking boxes. And then basically, but sticky, he's doing this in defiance of your family, and then basically going to the pressures of the family. Think about what's going on right now. That needs to be at the top of the top. Yeah, you can add that too. It's actually, so, she's trying to also, but she's also trying to balance both at the same time. She's trying to appease the family at the same time and, satisfy her own ambitions. I think you kind of get a little hung up on something. I think you need to have just a straight lead. I would just push it down more. And yeah, I wouldn't put it. That's an interesting conversation. Me, like the idea that she's actually doing stuff in the park is actually interesting. Yeah. Or, not everybody does what she's doing. What's your title? How many associate? There you go. She went from the STEM and the computer science to